So I will record this session and I will send it to you tomorrow, and you can have it to go back to or to share with anyone that you'd like. And I've also put the slides in the chat. So if you'd like to download those, you can do so, or I will send those to you tomorrow as well. So thank you very much. And let's get started. So I'll tell you a little bit about MEFA if you're not too familiar. MEFA has been around since 1982, and we are a not-for-profit state authority, and we help families plan, save, and pay for college. And we do that in a number of ways. We are the sponsor of the state's 2 college savings plans, the U Fund 529 plan and the U Plan prepaid tuition plan. We also have low-cost loans for families who need that type of financing to supplement financial aid and to pay for college. And then everything else we do is helping families at whatever age and stage your child is at toward the higher education process. So some of what we do, are giving information through webinars like these, and you can always find our list of webinars at mefa.org/events. So here, the topic tonight again is college financing, and here's the loose agenda. We're going to talk about the sources of financial aid. We're going to go through the application process, and then we're going to help you understand how colleges make financial aid decisions. All along the way, we're also going to talk about how families pay for college, and I'll be leaving you with lots of free resources. One key to take away here is that you have a lot of help with this process, and I hope that comes through loud and clear this evening. All right, so what is financial aid? And we get this question a lot, but it's really any money that is going to help you and your student pay for college. And it comes in 3 main types, I'll call them. The first is grants and scholarships, and that's the best type of financial aid. That's financial aid that is awarded to the student, and the student does not ever have to repay. So that's the best. But there are also 2 other types of aid, and that's work and federal student loans. Now, work is a way that students can earn money while they're in college, and one specific program that's very popular and a lot of students utilize is the federal work study program. And that allows a student to work on campus or work with a campus awarded job while they are a student. And it makes it easier to find a job, and they can usually work a small number of hours and get paid. And that will help with things like personal expenses, shampoo, pizza, maybe some books, some transportation, all of that. So students don't receive that up front, but it's very important, a little bit of money that really helps students pay for those incidentals that come up while they are a student. And then the last one is federal student loans, which that's the one we get raised eyebrows sometimes. People say, well, it's loans. That's not really financial aid. But we have a slide and a couple of slides that just talks about why the specific federal student loans really are a type of aid. And many, many students use federal student loans to pay for the cost. And then where does all this money come from? Well, it comes from a number of places. It comes from the federal government. The federal government has all kinds of financial aid that you'll be applying for. Massachusetts has some aid programs, and you can find out about all of that. But when you're applying for financial aid, you're also applying for Massachusetts granted aid. And then the colleges and universities themselves have a lot of financial aid that they are awarding to students. Now, when you go through the process that we're going to talk about of applying for financial aid, you're applying for all of these 3 at once, the yellow, blue, and green, if you can see those, the federal, the state, and the college and university aid. That's one big process. You apply and you're considered for all of that type of aid. The only type of aid that is separate, a separate process, is any private outside scholarships. So those can be anything from a big national scholarship from, say, the Coca-Cola Foundation or something, or something very local and personal. Maybe your employer or your high school has a number of scholarships sometimes that they award to students, seniors at the end of the year. So it can be anything that's, we call them private scholarships, outside scholarships. And students can go about that process by using some online scholarship searches like the two that I list here, or just keeping your eyes open as a family around in your town, at your school, again with your employer. The story I like to tell is that for years when I would go to the dentist, I saw that she, at the reception desk, she had a plaque that said that each year she gives out 2 scholarships to good community servants who live in our town. So you can bet that I paid attention to that. And when my students were seniors in high school, I made sure they knew to apply for that scholarship. So here's why those federal direct student loans are considered financial aid. If you can see those bullets on the left, the student is the sole borrower. So the student is the only one whose name is on the promissory note for these. There is no credit check. They have low fixed interest rates. The new rates for next year have been set 3.734. And the loan can be broken down into 2 parts, subsidized and unsubsidized. And subsidized means that the portion of the loan that's subsidized means that the federal government pays the interest on that loan while the student is in college. So that's huge. As we know, as adults, you don't get loans like this with no credit check and a student possibly with no credit history and a low fixed rate and subsidies like that. So that's why these loans are considered financial aid. And the last real benefit of these federal student loans is that there are many repayment options. So let's say a student were to take all of the federal loans they were eligible for as an undergraduate. And you can see over to the right, they can get $5,500 as a freshman, $6,500 as a sophomore, and then $7,500 as a junior and senior. So that would mean that the student would be taking out about $27,000 in loans for an undergraduate degree. And what that translates to in a regular repayment is about $300 a month for 10 years. And many students will graduate from college, get a job, and be able to make that payment. But some may not, either because they take a job that doesn't allow them to make that payment, but is important for their career, or maybe they have to move somewhere with a high cost of living, or they need transportation, or housing is expensive, whatever, for whatever reason. If they aren't able to make the payment, they can choose a different repayment plan. So that would be the regular repayment plan. That would be that $300 a month for 10 years. So they could choose one that might be income-based, and then they would just have to pay a percentage of their income. Now, anytime you lower the amount that you're paying on a loan, what happens is you end up extending the time to repay that loan, but at least it allows a student to take whatever job they want to take when they graduate that's important to them and be able to pay their student loans. So this is another great benefit of these loans. And then there are also deferment, forbearance, and forgiveness opportunities. So you'll see many students borrow these loans to go to college just because the cost of education is so high these days. So now let's talk about how financial aid is awarded and the reason it's awarded. And it's usually awarded for one or two reasons, and sometimes a combination of them. So the first is merit. So colleges each year want to bring in the best class they can. And by best, they mean an academically successful class that promises to do well at their school. They want to bring in a diverse class, and diverse in every way, ethnically, geographically, major wise. They want to have business majors, and they want to have biologists, and they want to have students on the football team. They want to have a real mix of students each year. And so they use their own institutional dollars in order to bring in that class each year. And so know that merit-based aid can be for academics, it can be for athletics, for artistic endeavors. Academics is the biggest, really. So students who have done well in high school and have a strong admissions application to submit to the college have a greater chance of receiving some merit-based aid. I'll make one caveat, which is that some colleges do not offer merit-based aid. And the biggest group of colleges, most well-known that I can mention is, for example, the Ivy Leagues do not offer any financial aid based on merit. All of their aid is based on need. But other than a smallish group of colleges that doesn't award merit aid, many colleges do. And then the other reason that financial aid is awarded is based on financial need. And that is need that's calculated based on the information that you submit on the financial aid applications that we're going to talk about. All right, so let's talk about that application process. And I will say I don't see any questions yet, but please ask your questions as we go along. All right, so the application process. The key here is that you as a family will apply for financial aid in the fall of senior year, the student's senior year. All colleges have different deadlines, just as they have different admissions application deadlines. They can have different financial aid deadlines, and do. And in fact, sometimes they also have different deadlines for students who apply regular admission. They might have a January deadline, but students who apply one of the earlier admissions processes, they might have an October or a November deadline. So one key is to stay organized with the process. And when students are researching their colleges and writing down admissions deadlines and what forms they need to complete for admissions and what they need to send, they should also make note of financial aid deadlines. But one way to just get by that whole process is to just complete financial aid forms in October. And that, I'll explain why that should be easy to do. And if you do that, you will basically meet all of the college deadlines. That doesn't take away the task of the student making sure that that's the case. But most of the time, those early deadlines are November 1st. There could be some October deadlines, but the majority start November 1st, November 15th. So if you get these financial aid forms completed in October, then you should be fine for all of the colleges. Double check what I'm saying, but I'd say that's the strategy. Just plan to get these forms done in October. And again, we'll talk about it. There's lots of help to help you do that. And I got a good question, which is, do we need to complete separate applications for multiple children or one application for the family? And the answer is you do need to do separate applications for each student, because technically the application is the student's application. So you'll do this, but I promise you it'll get easier after you do one. All right, good question. So what forms are you completing? What are we talking about with these financial aid applications? The first one, and the one that all colleges require, is called the FAFSA, and it's the free application for federal student aid. And again, it becomes available October 1st. You can either go online to fafsa.gov, or you can use your mobile phone and download the My Student Aid mobile app and complete it over the phone. And both of these ways work. You can do a little on one, save it, finish on the other. this form has gotten a lot easier despite what you might hear out there. The first step is to create what's called an FSA ID. That's really just a username and password. And you need one for the student and one for a parent. And then you go in and you can complete this form online or on the phone. And there is a connection to the IRS that many families are able to use. It's called the IRS data retrieval tool. There are sometimes families who can't if you moved, or there are a few reasons why, if you change marital status during the year, that you wouldn't be able to do that and you might have to type it all in. But for the most part, most families can use this data retrieval tool, which pulls your tax information right in and makes it fairly easy to complete this form. MEFA will also have lots of help in the form about, we'll have a webinar, and you can always call us if you have any questions. And this is a form that you'll do every year that your students are in college, but just plan to do it early, and you shouldn't have a problem. And we'll talk about all the things that are on the form. And I have a couple of questions here. Let's see. So, and someone's asking, should my child submit under himself or the parents? So that's also a good question. The form requires the student and the parents' information. So it's kind of nice if you can do it together, but you don't have to. The student could go in, start it, put his or her information, and then you could go in and put yours. If you can gather a nice little evening and sit down together and do it. Sometimes I see that's the fastest. So I've seen actually the two expertises. Usually the parents have a lot of the financial information, and the students are really good at doing these online form things. And so that combination kind of works well. And so that's my recommendation. All right, so what do you complete on the FAFSA? So you're going to put information in about the student's citizenship status is first. And students need to be citizens or permanent residents to be eligible for federal aid. However, let me pull this out because this is important. If a student is a US citizen or permanent resident, but their parents are not, then that's okay. The student is still eligible for aid. There's just one little difference that family will have to do, and that is if the parent is not a citizen or permanent resident, the parent should just put zeros for the social security number. And then what that means is the parent won't be able to get an FSA ID, that username and password. So on the last page, when you go to sign as a parent, you'll have to just print that last page, sign it physically, and mail the form in to the address on the top. So that's the only difference if a parent is not a citizen. And then something else that goes on this form is the colleges that the student is applying to will go on the FAFSA. Now you can do this in October and just add 1 or 2 schools and then continue to add schools if you decide to apply. So that's okay. You can always add schools later. Then you'll put parent information and marital status. And if parents are married, including same-sex parents, then your information will be on the form. Even if parents live together but aren't married, those parents are on the form. If a family, parents are divorced or separated, it's the custodial parent and current spouse, if there is one, who put information on the form. And the custodial parent is considered the parent that the student lived with more in the last calendar year. And if it was equal, it's the parent who gave the most support. And if that's equal, you just pick a parent to be the custodial parent. Legal guardians are not parents. And then you'll also put information like the number of people in your household, the number of children in college, and then financial information. And here's the key. For the coming fall, which will be fall 2021, and the student will be going to college in 2022, you will be using 2020 income, which hopefully will be all set. Hopefully your tax returns were submitted by May 17th, all set. And so that's why it makes it nice and easy with that IRS data retrieval tool, or even if you don't use that, you have that completed tax return in front of you. And then you'll put both taxed and untaxed income on the form, and then parent and student assets, savings, checking, investments, real estate property. 529 plans are considered, parent investments. But here are some things you don't include on the FAFSA. You don't put any information about your primary residence, your home. You don't put any information about the value of your retirement accounts. And you don't put any information about insurance or the value of a small family business that has under 100 employees. So those are key pieces that are left off the FAFSA. And you can't put credit card debt or any just outstanding debt like that. Any debt that's related to those investments or other property can be included, but you can't put any credit card debt. I'm going to see what questions we have here. Yeah, so someone just mentioned that you have school loans as a parent. So that's great. You know about these loans, and then the student will take her own loans in this case. So that's terrific. And this is a great question. So I'll get to this in a minute. Do we list 529 accounts that the grandparents have for the student? Really good question. So let me talk about that. No, that's the answer. You don't. However, there are questions on future FAFSA. When you're filing FAFSA in the future, there is a question that says any monies paid on your behalf, like from a grandparent 529 plan. So the following year, let's say the grandparent then uses $5,000 to pay for education in that freshman year. That could be asked about in the future, but that requirement is also going away in the 23-24 year. So I believe when I'm saying this to all of you, as I'm thinking ahead in years, you're going to be covered for all of that anyway. So the answer is basically no, you do not have to list grandparent accounts. And thank you for this. Also, a question about 529. The 529 plan is considered a parent asset, and that's important and that's good because parent assets are considered just in a very small way, and student assets are considered in a bigger way. So, for example, parent assets are considered at about 5% of the value is considered when thinking about your eligibility. Whereas student assets are considered about at 20% of the value. So 529 plans are considered parent assets because the parents are the owners. All right, I'm going to get to some of these others in a little bit. I'm just going to move along and I promise I'll get to them all. All right. Now, the FAFSA, that was the FAFSA. All colleges require that. Some colleges also require this other form called the CSS profile form. And the reason for that is I mentioned a few of those things that are not considered on the FAFSA, right? No information about your home, no information about small businesses with under 100 employees, just the custodial parent information. And so some colleges that have a lot of their own institutional dollars to award feel like the FAFSA doesn't give them all the information they need. So they need a little more information. And this CSS profile form does ask those additional questions, like about your home. If parents are divorced or separated, it will ask information about both parents. It will collect more information about family businesses. So if a college requires this form, you need to complete it as well. So one thing that students can do when they're looking at college websites is find out what forms are required. And if a college requires the CSS profile, you do need to complete it as a family. and just send it to those colleges who need it. And it does cost a fee. It's $25 for the first school and then $16 for each additional college. But it's well worth it because the colleges who use the CSS profile form and require it usually have a fair amount of scholarship dollars that they're awarding, and that's why they're asking for this additional form. This is also available October 1st, and I would get it all done together, as I mentioned. Some colleges may have their own financial aid application that just asks a few additional questions. So students can check online and see if there's that too. And if so, you should complete that as well. So there is a question here about what if the non-custodial parent has a 529 plan? Must that be reported on the custodial parent's FAFSA? So that's a great question. I'm going to cover it here because the answer is no. That's sort of the same situation as that grandparent 529 plan. So you do not need to include that on the custodial parent FAFSA. And someone's asking, can you start any of the forms before 10/1 or do you have to wait till 10/1? The FAFSA will become available October 1st. Sometimes the CSS profile is available that week before, so you can check in, but it's very close to October 1st. And then there's a question, if you have two kids, but one 529 plan, should you split them into two beneficiaries? Again, no, because it's not considered the beneficiary's asset. It's considered the parent asset. So you just put whatever the amount is, and it's considered a parent asset at that very low 5%. All right, we'll keep going, but I'll get to all of these questions. So then after you apply, you complete your form, the FAFSA or the FAFSA and the CSS profile, and you submit them. And what happens? Well, the colleges that you put on the forms and the state of Massachusetts receive the data electronically. And then the student and you, I will share, will receive a student aid report by email or mail. Now, I didn't mention this, but I actually currently have a college student, so I'm doing FAFSAs each year. And I think it's nice that now the student email is on the FAFSA and the parent email is on the FAFSA too. So what happens is, as the FAFSA is being processed, the student receives a notification, but also the parent receives a notification that says, this email was sent to your student, so that both can keep on top of this, which I think is terrific. So hopefully put good email addresses there, and you will be able to keep on top of your student aid report. And you can just check it over, make sure you don't see any glaring errors that you need to go in and correct, which you can do. You can go back in and go back into your FAFSA and make any changes if you need to. Also, I'll mention that if you complete both the FAFSA and the CSS profile and you finish it and you say, wow, we have these other special circumstances that weren't reflected at all on these forms I submitted, you can always contact the financial aid office with an additional email that says, here are a couple of other factors I'd like you to consider when reviewing my file. And the more succinct and financially driven that letter can be, the better. Let me give an example though. The CSS profile does have a section where you can write special circumstances. So you can put some information on the CSS profile. The FAFSA doesn't have anything like that. So if you need to share information with a FAFSA only school, you can do that. Or if you find that your situation takes longer to explain than that box on the CSS profile, you can also send an additional email. Also, colleges may require federal verification documents. It's just part of the process. So no, once you apply for financial aid at a college, make sure that student, parent, you read your email and just make sure they're not reaching out for additional information. Because that is part of the process. As a parent, the types of requests I received like that were, once I had to verify that my student didn't earn enough money to have to file taxes, and I just had to, sign a form and send that back. That was one thing. And I think at one point I had to verify that I had 2 students in college at the same time, and I was able to do that. So that's the type of thing that might go back and forth. And then the colleges are going to review these applications and determine financial aid awards for your student. And here I explained the verification process. And I also explained how you can write to the financial aid office. Once you apply to a college and you apply for financial aid at a college, just know that the financial aid office can be a really great resource for your questions as well. So keep that in mind. You might want to ask them questions about financial aid renewability at some point. Just making sure you really understand all the ins and outs of the financial aid offer. And especially, as I mentioned, if you have a change in circumstances, you have special circumstances, you can always write to the financial aid office. And on the website, they probably will tell you if it's best to call or email or chat. And then I do have another question about 529 plans here. If you have a 529 plan for another child who is not yet in college, do you report it since it's a parent asset? And yes, you do. And again, that's because it's considered a parent asset. I know that might sound strange because you're hoping that those funds are for the younger student, but the bottom line is it actually does work in your favor to have these 529 accounts treated as parent assets versus student assets for each student. So yes, you just put the total amount of the 529 accounts that you have. Yeah, and let me just say another word about, well, I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait about the appeal question because we're going to get to that. So, all right. All right, so now you've done your part. You can breathe for a short while, and then it's the college's turn to have to work to come up with a financial aid offer for your student. So how do they do that? Well, the first thing each college needs to do, and they need to do this every year, is determine how much it costs a student to be enrolled for the year. So they have to come up with what they call the cost of attendance. And that includes tuition and fees, room and board, if the student is going to live on campus, and then things like books, supplies, transportation, personal expenses, all of that, because it's no good for the student to have enough money for tuition, fees, room and board if they can't buy books or get around or buy little things they need to buy to live. They need all of this. So even though some of these are billed expenses and some are indirect, colleges know that the student needs enough money to cover all of these each year. And then from the information that you as a family put on these financial aid forms, a number comes out, which is called your expected family contribution, or EFC. And that is a number that it's determined that you can contribute to your child's education before financial aid kicks in. So, but what I'll say about that, it's not a number that anyone really feels you have right there and ready to hand over a cash or write a check. It's more a number that is comparing your family to all of the other families who are applying for financial aid during that given year to that specific college. And it's an amount that it's felt you can absorb given your financial situation. And let me say that if the EFC is not zero, and it can be zero, because it could be an expected family contribution of 0, where you as a family don't have 1 penny to be able to spend toward educational costs. But if it's more than 0, if it's 1,000 or if it's 40,000, it's always going to feel like too much. That's just my experience personally, and over 35 years of working in this field that I've worked with families. It always feels like a little too much, because again, it's nothing that anyone expects that you have right there, but it's just an amount that you can absorb as a family. So just keep that in mind, but there'll be an amount that you'll be expected to pay, and then financial aid will kick in after that. If you have younger students and you're wondering, or you just are curious and want to get a jump on your planning, if you want to use one of these EFC calculators, you can do that and type in information as you will on a financial aid form and get a sense of what your EFC might be. You can do that. And in fact, I'm going to come back to this, but I'm going to, well, okay, we'll stop there. So then the cost of attendance minus your expected family contribution is your financial aid eligibility. And that is the amount that colleges work to give a financial aid offer to meet that financial aid eligibility. And there are some colleges that promise to meet 100% of need of 100% of their students. And they'll brag about it. So you'll see that on their websites. And what they will do is put together a financial aid offer that equals that financial aid eligibility, because they're going to meet 100% of the financial need of all students. The Ivy Leagues promise to do that. And colleges like the Ivy Leagues, MIT, Stanford, they promise to meet 100% of need of all students. So that's the formula, and those colleges will meet that. Colleges that don't make that promise do their best to come up with a financial aid offer that comes close to that financial aid eligibility, because they know that your family needs that. So they do their best. So here's a little analogy I'm going to go through. I'm going to pretend I'm a financial aid administrator, and I'm going to put together a financial aid offer for your student. Okay. So my college costs $45,000 all in: tuition, fees, room and board, books, supplies, transportation, everything. And you as a family have an expected family contribution of $5,000. Let's hope that, right? So what I'm going to do is I need to fill this bucket with $45,000 worth of funding so that your student can attend. And this is, you know, a sort of funny picture of what financial aid administrators do, but they do. So the first thing into this bucket is your expected family contribution. We're going to make you pay first. Then I'm going to award a grant and a scholarship. Maybe the grant is need-based and the scholarship is merit-based, because your student is a strong student at this institution, strong candidate for admission. And then I'm going to put that student loan, that federal direct student loan that we talked about, in a freshman amount of $5,500. And I'm going to give a work study award, so the student can work on campus 10 to 12 hours per week, pay for personal expenses and things like that. And that's it. That's all I can do as a financial aid administrator at this college, because we are one of those colleges that we don't meet 100% of full need of every student. So what this means is, for you as a family now, you have to come up with your expected family contribution of $5,000 and that unmet need of $5,000 to be able to send your student to college here. So this is somewhat of a common scenario. And I'll mention this also. I mentioned those EFC calculators. Each college has a net price calculator on their website. So that's another place you can go on a college website, type net price calculator, and put in information as you will on the financial aid form, just to plan and get an idea of not only what you might be expected to pay, but what types of awards they're able to give. And I wouldn't make any hard and fast decisions around this. I wouldn't say to my student, don't apply there. I did the net price calculator and it didn't look like they gave you any aid. But what I did say to my students was, in certain cases, I did the net price calculator at X college and they didn't award too much grant and scholarship like some of the others. So make sure you have some other colleges on your list that might give more aid so that we can have some good choices in the spring. Though that's more of the type of conversation I had. All right, so then this is going to be a very common scenario senior year, winter, spring, when hopefully your student is receiving offers of admission and then you start receiving financial aid offers. And what you'll see is you'll receive a wide variety of financial aid offers. You would think you're one family and you have one financial situation, but colleges have all kinds of aid and you could get many different aid offers. And so it's really important to go through them with a fine-tooth comb and really look at them. So this is an example. This is a common scenario. So here are 3 colleges, and let's say they all cost $45,000. Your EFC is 5. So your financial aid eligibility is $40,000. Well, look at College A. They are one of those colleges that meets full need, and they have given the student a $40,000 financial aid offer. So that's great. So in that scenario, you as a family would just have to come up with your expected family contribution, and your son or daughter would be able to attend. College B gave a great offer to the student, but they're not one of those colleges that meets 100% of need for all students. So they left some unmet need of $7,000. And College C, similarly, they gave an aid offer, but they definitely don't meet 100% of need. And so they left a lot of unmet need of $15,000. And so what happens is then you as a family have to sit down and review these. And your hope, right, would be that College A is the student's #1 choice, because wouldn't that be a beautiful thing? But if by chance College B or College C is the #1 choice, well, then you need to have some conversations there. And one of them, I received a question a little bit earlier, is how do you appeal for financial aid? So one thing you could do is you could, if College B is the student's first choice, you could go to College B and say, College B is our first choice, my son's first choice. You know, he likes it because of X, Y, and Z, but we received, you know, more aid at some other places. Is there anything I can tell you about our situation that, you know, you could help us with it? So that's, you could go back and appeal in that way. Now, maybe College B would say, let me take another look at it. Can we ask you some questions? Or they might say, I'm sorry, we, you know, this is what we can do. We went out with our best offer. So, you know, that's kind of what you can do. You can always ask, and you don't know the answer you'll get, but that's one thing you could do here. Something else you could do here is, as a family, go back to College B, go back to College C. Maybe in the future, you'll be able to visit, ask questions, talk to people, student can talk to students, talk to people in the admissions office, find out as much as you can and find out, I know College A is the first choice, but can I get the same education at College B? And did I like a lot of things about College B or College C? And you can talk through to the student about what it might mean for them loan-wise or for your family if the costs are higher. And these are kind of the tricky conversations you will have as a family. And then I'll also add, you know, why is this? Why are these awards so different? Well, one could just be that College A may just have more resources and they're able to put those resources to financial aid and they're able to meet that full need, which is great. But also, this is where merit can come in a little bit too. Maybe College C does meet full need or come closer to meeting full need for the top students, but they can't do it for all students. And maybe in this case, your student was more in the middle of the pack at this college, College C. So that's why there was some unmet need. So that's why sometimes there can be a merging of financial need and merit-based, awarding. All right, I'll continue on. And here's just another reason you should pay close attention to these financial aid offers and make sure you're comparing apples to apples. We don't see this a lot anymore, but we do see it enough that we think it's worth pointing out. So if you look quickly at these 3 award letters, they look like, oh, all these colleges gave you $35,000 in an aid offer, but they really didn't. As you can see, College A and B gave some scholarships and College C didn't. A and B gave work study awards and College C didn't. And colleges B and C put something in there called a parent loan. And I will tell you that is not financial aid. So it doesn't belong in a financial aid offer letter. But sometimes colleges put it in there to let families know, like, oh, you can borrow the rest. Well, you know that, and you may choose to borrow a parent loan, but just take it out of here when you're comparing these offers to make sure you're comparing apples to apples, and then you can decide how to pay that unmet need. And you may choose to take a parent loan, but it doesn't really belong in the aid offer. All right, I'm going to take a sip and look at any questions. Okay, so I think I covered that, appealing the financial aid offer. All right, so let's talk about paying for college. So let's say the student finally chooses a college and says, yes, I'm going to go here, and you figure out between your EFC and any unmet need that you as a family are going to owe $20,000 per year. And that's key. But first year, you're going to owe $20,000. How do you come up with that? So you'll all do that differently. Every single one of you, I can almost guarantee every single one of you on the webinar tonight will do that slightly differently. But here's just an example of what that might look like for one family. So this family might say, okay, well, we're going to use some past income. Student, you have some savings. You worked a lot last summer and you have a lot of savings. So let's take $1,000 of your savings, and you can use that to pay. Parents have some savings and decide we're going to use $4,000 savings, say out of a 529 plan this year. And then all colleges have something called a monthly payment plan that is not a loan, but it's a way that you can just decide to pay, not just fall bill, spring bill, but instead pay over 9, 10, 11, 12 months. And usually there's a small fee, maybe $60. You join the plan and then you can pay monthly. So let's say the family that I have here might say, well, we just paid off a car loan, so we have an extra $500 in our budget per month. So we're going to pay monthly on the school's monthly payment plan. We're going to pay $500 for 10 months. So you join the monthly payment plan, and that's $5,000. And then this family might say, well, this is what we feel comfortable with savings wise. We need to take an education loan for the rest of that. So they're going to take a $10,000 education loan. And let me explain the places that you would do that perhaps, and you'll get into this further next year, but the federal government has something called a PLUS loan, parent loan for undergraduate students. So maybe as a family, you borrow a PLUS loan. MEFA has loans that a variety of loans, different repayment terms and things like that, with usually even better interest rates than the PLUS. So you'd look to MEFA. You might have a bank that you do business with that has education loans. You look to them, credit union. And then you will choose where you're going to borrow that education loan from. And the other question I sometimes get at this point is that parents will say, is it the student who takes this loan or the parent? And at this point, there's going to be a credit check, and you need to have credit for these other types of loans, anything other than that federal student loan. So usually this loan either has to be the parent or the student with the parent as co-signer, or both people on the note. And another piece is, if you take a $10,000 education loan, that might roughly end up being, $100 payment or something. But you have to keep in the back of your mind that that's just for the first year. And if you do it for the first year, you're probably going to have to continue it. So keep that in mind when choosing borrowing amounts and things like that. And that's where you have more of this, what we call kitchen table conversations. So let's say you sit down as a family and you say, we don't have $20,000. We aren't going to be able to we're not going to be able to do something like this family did. What are our options? So maybe the student could start at a community college, get all those required courses out of the way, save significant amounts of money, and then transfer to the four-year college of their choice. Just a thought, but something to talk over. Something else you want to think about, parents, is maybe you can take this education loan and even take it for 4 years for this student. But do you have other students who are going to be coming up behind? Are you going to have to borrow for them too? Keep all of that in mind. And then obviously thinking in terms of the 4 years, the total debt. And then what should students be thinking about? Students should be thinking about, what is my post-graduation monthly loan payment going to look like? I know what it's going to look like for the student loans, the federal student loans. If I need to take on responsibility for more and my parents expect me to pay that back, how much more is that going to be? Will I be able to do that with my intended career? Do I know what my intended career is? Do I have any idea of salary? Maybe some students do, many won't, but those are just things to really think about. And then think also about, do I want to go to graduate school? What does that mean? I might need to take a break if I take all these loans and I have to pay off before. So just be having all these conversations. Also, as I mentioned, any loans outside of the federal student loans, we'll do a credit check. So sort of know your credit score when thinking about borrowing those. And these next few slides are just some other things to think about to keep costs down. I mentioned that community college option. Here in Massachusetts, we have programs called Mass Transfer, and there are a number of programs under the Mass Transfer umbrella, all of which allow a student to start at a community college and then transfer to a Mass public four-year college. And it can end up being a very affordable degree. There are things like automatic admission, guaranteed credit transfer, tuition credits, freezes on tuition. Check out this website and just look at all of those options. And then the one below is called Tuition Break. That's a way to keep public institutions in New England outside of Massachusetts, keep those costs down as well, because there are a number of programs who will allow a student to attend out of state but pay in-state tuition. And then free resources to help you through all of this. I hope you can tell by this presentation and all that we have at MEFA that you can always be in touch with us and call us and attend our future webinars for all the different pieces of this. But there's also a program called FAFSA Day in Massachusetts that will hold events to help you complete the FAFSA in the fall. So you can go to fafsaday.org and check that out. We have equal opportunity centers across the state. Mass EdCo is a large one where you can get free FAFSA help. And this is a timeline that I'll be sending you this presentation, so you'll have this. And I would say for now, the key is to keep researching those colleges, stay organized, maybe with a spreadsheet, for both the admissions process and the financial aid process and the dates, knowing that in the fall, you want to be ready to get on these financial aid applications in October. You can stay in touch with us on social media. We also put a lot of information about outside scholarships monthly. So stay connected to our social media. And we're going to open it up for more questions, knowing you can always call MEFA. You can always email MEFA. And if you liked the information that we've talked about tonight, if you want to give us a review on Google, that's really helpful so that other families can find us and know that we're a free resource to help you. All right, so let me get to some of your questions. I see there are some more questions here, and keep them coming. So there's a question about a custodial parent who has a partner they're not married to. And so that information does not need to be included on the FAFSA. Oh, and another one like that too. Okay. So this is a question right back if I don't answer it, but the question says if one parent owns their business, you would not include. The key is on the FAFSA, you don't include the value of a family business that has under 100 employees. So it doesn't matter which parent owns it. The key is, does it have under 100 employees and it's a family business? But on the CSS profile, they will ask you questions about the business. So hopefully that answers your question. And then someone is asking me to show the timeline again. So I'm going to go back to the timeline. Yeah, so you're in spring and summer of junior year, maybe. I didn't ask you at the beginning. But here, the key is really spending the time researching colleges so that the student can find a nice group of colleges that they want to apply to. And then move right into the fall when that application process starts. And I would highly encourage submitting the financial aid applications in October. And let's see what other questions we have. Oh, thank you. I'm glad for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so here's a great question. If you inherit a bit of money and it's sitting in a money market, should I move it into a 529 plan? So I'm definitely not a financial advisor. So I'm going to send you to your financial expert. However, from a financial aid perspective, what I'd say is that any asset that you have like that will be treated similarly. So if it's in a money market or it's in a 529 plan, it will be treated the same. So all parent assets are treated at a rate of at most 5.6%. So just to break that down, what does that mean? So what that means is, let's say I'll do low end and high end. Let's say you have a $10,000 asset. That's going to increase the amount you'll be expected to pay for college, increase your EFC by at most $560 with $10,000. Let's say you have $100,000 in assets, either a money market or a 529 or anywhere else. Then that will be considered at 5.6%. That will increase your expected family contribution by $5,600 per year. Still a fairly low amount, given that you have a $100,000 asset. So really, my advice to you is to do what's best for your larger family financial situation with some expertise and guidance, knowing that that amount itself will be treated the same in either case. Now, again, for FAFSA only schools, the assets that aren't taken into consideration are your primary residence and your retirement accounts. So that's good to know. That can factor in sometimes when you're thinking about where things are sitting, just for FAFSA purposes. But if you then have to complete a CSS profile, the college will look at all of that. So I'll give it another moment, because sometimes when I say good evening, good luck, then someone will ask a quick question. So I'll just give another moment to see if there are any more questions. Well, oh yeah, so that's a good question. What's the end date for the application if we want to add a college? Great question. You know, there's really no end date. The end date is at the end of the student's enrollment year. So there's a long time to submit. So for example, if you never file a financial aid form and the student is in college, almost finishing up their year, and you want them to take a federal student loan, you can still file that FAFSA, but you've missed out on all of the other aid. So you do want to file as soon as possible, but as your student is adding colleges, that's fine. You can add them as you go along. You just hope that you meet that college's deadline for financial aid. Hope that answers that question. And good question. What type of accounts are considered retirement accounts? Really qualified retirement accounts. So things like 401k, IRA, those type. Now, if you have done something different with your money, hoping it would be for retirement, that would be maybe a special circumstance. You could reach out to the college. But in general, it has, in order to just not include it, it needs to be one of those qualified retirement accounts. And someone is asking if I can show the mass options slide again, and I will. And what I will also say is, again, tomorrow, I will send this recording and the slides, so you'll have all of that at your fingertips as well. And thank you for all the thank yous. And I will say you've been a great audience. Those were great questions. And I wish you all good luck with all of this. And please know that come back, ask your questions of MEFA, and we will help you all the way through. All right. You're so welcome. Have a good evening.